She was Lewis before she was married. Then she married a bonus, and he was killed in the quarries. Left her with 7 little children, with 1 a week old. No pensions, no money, nothing came in. All she had to do was to sit down and make shirts at a shilling, and you know those tough workman shirts. And then she did try to do a bit of spinning, but she said she was never quick enough on the spinning. Oh yes, she sat up with people, she nursed people, she laid them out, she brought children into the world. If she was there, the doctors never bothered to come. That was the tap in those days. Whoever went for the doctor would say, well, who's there? Oh, Mrs. Allenby's there. Oh, then I'll not bother to come till morning. You see, it was totally different to what it is today. There's no going to hospital. Well, there was no going to hospital. They didn't go to hospital. She only had the medicine that the doctors brought. The doctor used to come round and he'd have 3 bottles. If you had a cough, it was a brown bottle. If you had a stomach, it was a white bottle. And if you had another sort of a pain, it was a pink bottle. Night time, after it was finished, she would set off and walk up to Bleetown, and she'd walk to Hallgarth, she'd walk to High Park, she'd walk wherever she had. There was an old lady, a Mrs. Dixon before her used to go, and there was another old lady from the Lancashire side, was a Mrs. Brownlee. She had to be prepared. You see, she knew this child was coming in, she would be prepared. And of course, they always said if they saw her going out in her blue coat, she was either bringing them in or taking them out. She didn't want anything. She didn't charge anything, she didn't want anything. Neither did I. We never charged anything for anything we did. We just did it because it was friendship. I remember having to go and gather for Easter ledges, for Easter pudding. If you ever went to Wilson Place and went straight up from the house, right up as though you got up to Hackett, there should be a whole big bed of Easter ledges there. Your boys made it up into, it was a pudding, Easter ledge pudding. There was ledges and nettles and various things, you know, would be, that was going out, you see.
My father, he come from Borridle, and my mother, she was brought up at, 3 shires now. It was tourist rest then. Well, when I was at school, there was 3 school teachers and 72 children in
That's a little Langdale school.
Aye, little Langdale school, aye. And they used to come from Tilberthett and
Home
ground. And Miss Wolfe, who was school teacher then, she used to make a good pan of cocoa for them at dinner time, so as they'd ought to drink. Oh, well, every house, it had 6 and 7 folk in nearly, hadn't it, Jim?
Oh, yes.
They were all quarry fellas, and how they all got in, I often wondered. Lodgers as well they had. And there's only 1 double room and a single room.
You wonder where they all slept at. Really.
And then there would be like 3 and 4 in every...
In Greenbank too.
Greenbank, same, aye. They were all quarry fellas, weren't they, Jim?
Yes, practice them all.
Aye.
They were.
No, it's fairly altered to what it was then. Oh, it was a hard life then in them days for everybody, I think, wasn't it? Farmers worse than the quarrymen.
Well, I've heard mother say what father got, but during the war years, when he was cutting wood, it was very little.
Plain wood pudding, we got a penny about every 3 months for toffees if we were lucky. But no, we of course there was a sheep, we had odd sheep at times, didn't you?
Oh, yes.
And rabbits, there was rabbits. But yeah, it was rough. But we didn't starve. We've had to fight all our life for things. When I was a lad, we were fighting for telephone. And it fought away for years, and after a bit telephone, we did it, what, about 1936 would it be?
I don't know.
Then after that, they started fighting for water. And we fought at that till about 1948, something like that. Then after we got water, we had to fight for the electric. And, well, I think Jim would be among us. We went to Kendal and walked around streets of Kendal.
No, I didn't go.
With cannons, I went.
I hadn't time.
And walked around streets of Kendal in protest. And we haven't had electric them many years. I know how long we've had it. It went through when I got to Colletha here, which is 20 years ago. It went to Great Langdale in 55. And it would be 2 or 3 years later when it went to Langdale.
Yes, it was, Albert.
So it'd be about towards 1960 before we got the electric up Langdale. What it was when I was a lad, I can't get over. There was one time, there was only one going to school out of Langdale a few years back. They were improved again now, haven't they?
Oh,
But we had 3 teachers. Well, it seems amazing that they should all just vanish like that.
Do you remember Missy Dixon?
No, I don't remember at school. That you were at school.
Oh, I was at school, Miss Davies come. She married Billy Dixon. We went 3 shires. A good break with her one morning. Her and Billy was going off and they were courting. And we were going hunting. She comes tripping down for the schoolhouse. Got to the road ends, her knickers dropped down. She jump out of them, put them under her arm and away down to 3 shires. There was a good laugh about that. That's perfectly true, is that like? Everybody helped in them days. We were supposed to help with hay and that on our holidays. Summer time. Well, I used to go to Fellfoot for summer holidays and, well, I can remember fine days, one after another. You could leave a field out in rolls and you'd be there the next morning, you know, to start carting, but summer seemed to worsen as time went on. This last, well, they've had a good summer, but then it took far longer to get hay in them days when it was all cut with horses,
Well,
hand work.
You used to get up at daylight, for daylight, didn't you?
Oh, I used to get up and I jumped on our old horses, back lying down with Beck before they woke up. It's a funny sensation, I know. You try it sometime, get on a horse when it's lying down. Boy, we have to stick to him else he'll have you off. Our first horse came from Faulkner's, Ambleside, you know. He was all iron grey horse, Sammy we called him. He ran coaches. He'd been a gun horse in the army.
He had on him, hadn't he?
Well, they'd won at Busk same, but theirs is a smaller horse than ours. But our old Sambo was a grand old horse. Well, Dick was. They were the best moors I think would ever be in Little Angle. They could knock it off. We got a new machine and we started. They could mow.
Saddle pack is on the tail. Away, away! The fox is following up the dale. Away, me lads, away! Pound millers on the scent I'm told, so footy lads through frost and cold, that mountain breeze is pure as gold. Away, me lads, away! On Branstey Fell that fox is seen. Away, away! The hounds are off the scent is keen. Away, me lads, away! 'Tis music sweet to dalesmen's ear when hounds come out so loud and clear. So off me lads and lend a cheer. Away, lads, away! Now who'd weary with a sport like this? Away, away! But who a myrtle hunt would miss. Away, me lads, away. The hardy fellsman hunters born will very too yon huntsman's horn, nor heeded be by rain or storm. Away! Now in winter darkness doors to Myrtle high. Away! For who the Dunbull dedicated. Away, me lads, away! For as you guide you'll find a bed to rest our limbs and lay our head. We're welcomed, warmed and housed and fed. Away, me lads, away! Now in winter Myrtle's free and clear.
I had a dog from as long as I can remember, and it never went with anyone else. So I mean, even in lambing time, I could. We used to always drive all the sheep out of the meadows at Bays Brown in case it'd come a flash flood. Yeah. Every night in lambing time, and Father would go and sort all the unlambed ones off and drive them up into Brackenhow, and me and my brother would take the ones with lambs. I can remember they were busy hay time, and it would be, I wouldn't be any more than 8 or 9, and he said that Father said that this hay ready and they would have to get it that day, and he was frightened that there'd be wicks amongst the sheep up Mixelton, and we had a cousin stopping with us, one of our cousins stopping as well, and so he set us 3 off to go to Bowfell to gather bottom up to Stake Falls, which in those days you could keep sheep in because the walls were all up and they had gates on. And we had to see what they were like. He set us off with a tin with some stuff to put on if there was any wicks and some shears to clip them off. But anyway, luckily they were all right, and I know it seemed a long way for 3 lads, 9 and less, to walk from Bays Brown to Stake and back again.
I remember your father telling me he walked over in the rain. He had a new Herdwick jacket on.
that was when he came to when we came to got Millbeck. That was September time, just before Eskdale Show, and we were caught in Bracken, and Mother said, come in and have a cup of tea before you go back for another load, and just we were sat having our cup of tea, and this car came into the yard, and for a car to come into the yard at Tow House in 1936 was a red letter day. Because even postman came on a bike, and the only car that ever came was Woodall with his groceries. He used to come about once a fortnight, and that was the only car you ever saw. And this car came into the yard, and we couldn't believe it really, and it came down and parked in front of the door, and then the chauffeur got out and opened the door, and it was Mrs. Healis, British Pathe, in all the black dress and everything, and she'd known Father, like he'd helped her out at Tarbeck Park after she took it, and she knew him well, and she just come to the door and she said, can I have a word with you? She used to call him Joe. She said, can I have a word with you, Joe? And he said yes, and they went into the sitting room, and I didn't know what was going on, and your Father didn't say anything, but seemingly Harry Mounsey had sold Millbeck to Mr. Trevelyan, and he was handing it over, he would eventually hand it over to the trust, and his solicitors was Healis's at Ambleside, was so British Pathe husband was in charge of it, and that's what she came for, to get him back to Langdale. And he just said that night after she'd gone, he said, you'll have to milk cow in the morning and just carry on, get some work done, and he said, I'll not be here, and he'd gone early. He walked to Elterwater to catch the 8 bus, went to Kendal, to the bank, back to Ambleside and signed up for, got a rent agreed and that with Heelish for the farm, and then walked back to our house. And that was the night it rained all the way back. The war started in 1939, didn't it? In 1939 was that terrible snow, wasn't it, when they dug the road out from Chapel Stiles. The snowplough got to Thrangbrow, and then after that it had to be dug out all the way from there to Stow End because Jim Mitchell had appendicitis and they were had to dig him out, dig the track there to get him out to hospital. They worked all the last night. They worked all night till they got to Stow End because the ambulance was waiting there to pick him up to get him to hospital. But it was like, I mean, a lot of mornings they dug this track out, but like quarrymen and well, a few councilmen, and the quarrymen couldn't get to work, so the council hired them, and it used to blow at night, and then it blew a lot of it into there again, and they were spent an hour every morning clearing out what it had blown in the night before. And there was a fair gang of them. They used to get quite a stretch done in a day, but I mean, it would be a fortnight or more, wouldn't it, before the postman ever came. There was just no way it could get. I know we went.
Really deep then as well. Really deep as well.
Oh, tremendous deep, yeah. All the meadows at up Langdale years ago, there was a whole lot of different herbs then, where there isn't any at all now. It's just pure grass that they grow now. I mean, there was burnips and vetches and all sorts of things in those meadows.
You know the difference.
Which everything must have had a purpose. Well, I mean, those meadows, before you cut them, they were just a mass of colour, weren't they, and different flowers. Well, it won't come back as long as they keep putting nitrate on it. Like, I mean, there was no nitrate at all went on in those days. I mean, all the till it ever got was lime about every 3 or 4 years, and then some basic slag, and the farmyard manure. That's what it got. There was no nitrogen at all, and now, I mean, they never stop putting it on, do they? Just as soon as they get one cut off, or the cows eat it off, or the sheep eat it off, then they give it another go, and it just comes up. But I mean, there's no natural no natural growth, and there's no strength in it. I mean, it gets a shower of rain on, and it just drops down, doesn't it? In the spring of '47, I mean, everybody was desperate, really desperate. I mean, well, Father had a nervous breakdown that summer, like the worry of the sheep he'd lost and cows bawling at you day and night because they were hungry till the grass came. I mean, it would make anyone ill, and that'll never happen again. Because I mean, they can get just enough. Well, they can get enough silage to last them for almost 2 years now. I know. In '47, we were getting at the Farmers' Union to do something for us because we were all desperate, and they got a load of hay to come. And the driver was from Welland Garden City. Where's that at? And he landed with his load of, well, it was thrashed clover. It was more like bundles of kindling than hay. And he had so many bales for each farm. He started at Harry Place, he dropped so many off there, so many at Robinson Place. He turned up lane at Millbeck, and you know, that corner, just as he got to going round there, back end fell off. And he went back and he counted them and he said, "That's you a lot." And we said, by this time it was dark then, And we said to him, what are you going to do tonight? He said, well, I don't know. I said, he said, I didn't know it was this bad. I thought it would have been, I'd been here long since. And so he said, well, you can stop with us for tonight. Have supper and breakfast next morning. And so we carried these bales in and then straightened the rest of his load up, and then he set off and he went to Middlefell and Warland and Stowland next morning before he went back. But I mean, a load of hay split in between 6 or 7 farms.
That's a lot.
But luckily, that spring was a marvellous spring. After the snow finished,
Again, it
it was a marvellous spring. I mean, grass grew like it had never grown before. I'm sure it did, and we turned our milk cows out because we had nothing inside for them at 5th of April, and they survived. They never went back in again. That's from till back end again. I mean, whereas many springs you can't even turn them out till the end of April or into May. Well, it was the National Trust in their wisdom when they bought Side House. They put the sheep and the fell rights to Middlefell, which I thought was all wrong. I didn't want Side House to be split up. I wanted Side House to be left as a small holding for a starter, because there's no starter farms left now. I mean, you have to start. If you start now, you have to start well almost at the top to get into one of the bigger places now. I mean, there's some good farming families started at Side House over the years, and like Bob Burkett, he started there. He wouldn't have a penny when he started, wouldn't Bob? It's sad, these little farms. I mean, but the trust wouldn't have it. I argued with them for weeks about it. They were determined that they were going to put most of the land to Millbeck and the sheep to Middlefell, and that was it. And you couldn't get them to think any differently.
We used to have some lads come from Blackpool every weekend that ever came. Climbers they were. They'd sleep in the barn, and I had to make them the dinner at night and the breakfast at morning, and then some supper or tea, whichever you call it, before they went back off home. And when they got better off, they got 1 or 2 motor cars amongst them. And they came all those years. Well, I was down at Side House 14 years, I think. Anyway, and they started coming just after. But they came all those years and they never had an accident until the first day we were at Yodel, and one was killed off Gimmercrag. Right. There used to be what we called the guest houses, and they had the guest house at Barra House, just across from Derwentwater. And they used to come up on 3 coaches, double-horse coaches, and then off they would go somewhere. And most of them had glasses of soda water and milk. And then they all had tea when they came back, and that was what they did.
English Lake District can offer climbers as good a sport as they'll find anywhere, and if they're so minded, with all the perils thrown in. So let's take a look at our climbing boots, with a careful eye for all their good points underneath. Then we'll put on our rope harness and go out to carry the first mountain by assault. But we must take care. The mountain mists are treacherous. They come up almost without warning, and while we're occupied finding hand and footholds on the bare rock, the low-lying clouds might engulf us. Up we go in an almost perpendicular climb, 20 feet of good alpine club rope separating us from a companion. Some of the handholds are good, like this one, and some a little precarious. That corner wants a bit of negotiating, but the going on the whole is risky but pleasant. Rock faces are continually swept by falling stones which have to be guarded against. The stones fall more frequently on some days than on others, according to the weather, so we have to look out for all the signs and take every care. To take these pictures, the camera was pointed almost straight upwards. But we won't look down at it in case, well, you never know. But we can look across the sunlit valley. There's a mist rising. We can smell it and see it, so we must climb with even greater caution. There's no doubt about it now. It's a cold, vapory mist that sweeps over us, for the moment blotting out the rugged peaks and enshrouding the lake below. But just as it can spell disaster to the unwary, it can mean a safety curtain to us, for we're taking no chances, especially as there isn't much further to go. We're making doubly sure of our footholds and feeling exhilarated with a strenuous climb, to say nothing of the glow of conquest at overcoming his mountainous majesty. The last few hundred feet are not easy. The mist has gone, but the goal makes the effort worthwhile. To us, being on top of a mountain feels like being on top of the world.
Top Hackett, he'd got to be a visitor house first as I can remember.
Oh, aye.
That was the First World War when Dr. Seaman, he was a German. Dr. Seaman, they called him. We used to take milk up for him, he was a nice fella, no, but when he came up here, they had their eye on him, you know. Aye, Dr. Seaman. But he'd a practice in London, I think.
Well, you see,
But that was about first
Ah.
house what was let to visitors, I think.
there was very few though.
Oh, there was practically.
You see, there was no bed and breakfast. See, there's only trouble at tourist rest, really, wasn't there? If you
And Miss
visitors?
Peppers,
Oh, Miss Peppers, aye, that's
Daleview.
But you see, then summer only lasted from June till, September, didn't it, for
Oh,
visitors?
there wasn't much holidays.
It was only about 3 months of visitors, isn't it, like it is now? Of course, I don't know how they would get here. How would they get with horse and trap?
Oh, they used to fetch them with wagonettes. And, well, I'll tell you, we'd got to be a visitor house. Farmhouse with meals. They used to hire a Bell's coach to fetch their family and all their luggage when they came from Coniston's Windermere Station up to the Ivy Howe there. Aye, they did. A two-horse coach used to fetch them.
When would that be?
Oh, about First World, soon after, about First World War. Aye.
In the windswept jaws of Rhino's Pass stands the Three-Shire Stone. One pace either way and you're in Cumberland, Westmoreland or Lancashire. According to the common idea of the County Palatine, there ought to be a bunch of dirty mill chimneys in sight somewhere. Strangely enough, there's nothing of the sort to be seen. Northwards, Cumberland and Westmoreland offer you the grand peaks of Pike of Bliscoe, Bowfell and the Langdale Pikes. But turn your face to Lancashire, and you don't have to knock any marks off when you look at Fairfield, Wetherlam and the Old Man of Coniston. True, you will very soon find industry of a sort if you turn south. The finest slate in the world is quarried around here. You may think it's rather a pity to scar the mountains like this, but after all, these grey stone buildings that mean somebody's hard-won livelihood don't spoil the landscape nearly so much as one yellow and red bungalow built for somebody's pleasure. The ancient quarries are there if you choose to look for them, but why bother when you can rest your eyes on such loveliness as that of Tarn House? There's a Lancashire youngster. You see, they don't all have to dabble in the dirty canal for tiddlers to put in at last jar. When people live in the heart of such beauty, can you wonder that amongst them have been found poets like Wordsworth and artists like Romney? If you must have your Lancashire file indexed as an industrial county, well, here's the oldest industry of them all.
Mother and a cousin went, who was living with us. They took in visitors, and then for the first year, and then that was just about when the youth hostel started up, and they had a youth hostel at Coniston, didn't they? At up the mines there, and they had Black Sail at Enniddle, between Wastel and Enniddle. And they wanted one in between if they could get one, and they come to Tor House and to see if, well, they went round all the farms to see if anybody would be interested, and they decided to have a go. I mean, they could get a lot more in because they provided us with bunk beds and that sort of thing, so that you were getting, where a room would have only had 2 in before, could get 4 in and that sort of thing, and it got us, we could take about, I think it was about 10 or 12 or something, and it was 3 shilling a night, wasn't it, in those days for the youth hostel, a shilling for the supper, a shilling for the bed and a shilling for the breakfast. But they were supposed to do so much work of a night to help make the meal and so much before they went out in the morning, such as washing up and that sort of thing. But Mother and Mary decided that they could get on much better without the nap by either end of the day, and that's what they did. And so we took, they had, the hostel would be a tow house till they built the new one down near the Woolpack there, just a few years after we left.
We always used to go and talk to Coopers.
And yet
Just-
I don't
just
think
opposite.
there was nobody for a while longer worked at Powder Works, was there, Jim, though? That I can remember of. It always seemed to be purely for Elter Water and Good Langdale at Powder Works.
Billy Mathis, old William Mathis would join her a bit.
Oh, yeah,
Over
because
there,
like
aye.
it seemed as though that we were never in on Powder Works, like.
I don't think anybody did work at Powder Works much from over our side.
No, I don't think they did.
I would say most of them went into the quarries, or I think probably not so many would go into Powder Works. They graduated, but a lot of them went into farming, of course. And,
Yes.
and
So there's
there was-
plenty of jobs for you, and there was
well,
no
there
worry
seems
about
to be.
jobs.
There never used to be any worry. No. Except when, of course, when we got to 1931, of course, the quarry was in a bad way then. There was,
And did you want to go?
well, we never thought of anything else.
No.
I mean,
Because your father went?
yes, that we never thought about going anywhere else.
And what was it like at the quarries? Was it very hard?
Well, I suppose it was, but you never thought about it, did you? When you go at 14, you have to serve 2 years as weighing slate. And during that time, of course, you do a bit of riving or dressing. Then, after that, when you get to 16, you go on to learning the job properly. So they used to say put the gutter in one way, you call the guttering, you see, it's kind of making it weaker. Then you turn them over, and then you had a big mallet, and you had to do that way. Sometimes it was quite difficult, but of course, you know, some was worse than others, but it was all right. But we never thought about it, you know. But when we were weighing slate, there was about 21 different kinds of slate, and you used to have to take them out. And we used to weigh them in hundredweights on the scales, and the oldest used to have a hundredweight and 11 pound. That made 22 hundredweights a ton. And then, of course, when you dock the lump, and you knock the pieces that are no good off. You want to split them into certain thicknesses. They join into weights and then into fours. And you used to use a smaller wedge for that, and a sort of a single hand hammer.
It may be taboo to swear in a newsreel, but I can't very well avoid telling you that you're about to see and hear Britain's record blast. Behind the wall of rock in this Westmoreland quarry are 10 tons of gunpowder to bring down 100,000 tons of rock. The cameramen are back in the trenches and 100,000 tons. Some of those boulders are 1,000 tons each. Granite from this quarry was used for the King George V graving dock at Southampton, and some of these blocks are for the new bridge at Inverness, so it's all for a very good cause.